The next reading from the Word of the Lord is from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, which is the last chapter in John, which is the last of the four Gospels. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and in this way he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We are going with you also." They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Then Jesus said to them, "Children, have you any food?" They answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits, dragging the net with fish. Then as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish which you have just caught." Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land, full of large fish, 153, and although there were so many, the net was not broken. Jesus said to them, "Come and eat breakfast." Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And our final reading is from the work Arcana Celestia, or Secrets of Heaven, part of number 904. The Lord's presence is relative to the state of love toward the neighbor and faith present in a person. It is in love towards the neighbor that the Lord is present, for he is present in all good, and not so much in so-called faith that is devoid of love. Faith devoid of love and charity is something severed or disjoined. Wherever conjunction exists, there has to be a conjoining agency, which can only be love or charity. This may become clear to anyone from the fact that the Lord has compassion on everyone, loves everyone, and wishes to make everyone eternally happy. A person, therefore, who is devoid of the kind of love that leads him to have compassion on others, to love them and to wish to make them happy, cannot be joined to the Lord, because he is not at all like him and is in no sense an image of him. Looking to the Lord by means of that which goes by the name of faith, while hating the neighbor, amounts not only to standing a long way off, but also to having between oneself and the Lord a hell-like chasm into which the person would fall if he wished to go any nearer. It is hatred towards the neighbor that constitutes that intervening hell-like chasm. The Lord is present with a person the moment he starts to love the neighbor. It is in love that the Lord is present, And to the extent that a person has love, the Lord is present. Amen. Here end the readings from the Word. Blessed are those who hear the Word of God and keep it. The disciples fished all night and caught nothing. Working all night long is dismal enough as it is. So to work all night and get nothing for it is a pretty perfect illustration of deeply frustrating failure. And to make it worse, fishing was something that the disciples were supposed to be good at. At least 3 of them, Peter, James, and John, had been fishermen before they were called to follow the Lord. They went out fishing because, it seems, they didn't know what to do with themselves. They had experienced a total defeat when they watched the Lord be crucified. Total failure when they abandoned him at the moment of his arrest. And then in spite of that failure, they witnessed an impossible-seeming victory. They'd seen the Lord alive. And that victory had nothing to do with them. Seems like they didn't know how to be a part of the new thing that the Lord had made. And so they went out fishing. And that brought them no clarity, only frustration. Over and over through the night, they threw in the net and brought up nothing. And then at daybreak, a man standing on the shore told them to throw their net on the right side of the boat. An experienced fisherman might roll his eyes at that sort of suggestion. A very tired fisherman might get very irritated at being given that sort of advice. But the disciples were either desperate or they were moved by something that they perceived in this stranger standing on the shore, so they listened. They threw the net on the right side of the boat, and that made all the difference. The story is a good one to turn to if you're looking to confirm that there must be a deeper meaning to the stories of the Word. If what's described here isn't somehow symbolic, then it's really random. Obviously, this was a miracle. Fish don't favor the right sides of boats. The Lord made a point of making it work when they fished on the right side because He wants us to see that fishing on the right side works. So what does the right side mean? Fishing means searching for answers and also teaching. To fish, especially when you're fishing with a net, is to reach down into the dark and cold, down where you can't see, trying to bring up something useful. When we teach people, when we try to lift ideas out of darkness and present them to people, that's spiritual fishing. And when we comb the depths of our own minds, trying to figure something out, that's also fishing. The disciples fished all night and got nothing, and that represents searching for answers and not finding any. Trying to figure something out over and over and failing. And the right side represents love. Represents the good of life, the good of charity, the good that exists when we love and serve the Lord and the neighbor. The Lord's message is this simple. When we come from love, things work. When love is the goal, things work. And those two statements mean the same thing, even though coming from love sounds like it has to do with where we start, and making love the goal sounds like it has to do with where we end up. Really, in any process, the beginning and the end make one, because any process starts with recognizing the goal. Fishing in this story, the right side in this story appears in the context of fishing. Fishing on the right side means searching for answers, searching out the truth from love and for the sake of love. So part of the Lord's message in this story is that if his disciples want to catch men, as he said, then they need to fish on the right side of the boat. They need to teach love. They need to teach the good of life. But the Lord's also saying something through this story that applies to all of us, whether or not we're teachers of the truth. He's telling us how to find the answers that we're looking for. We hear all the time that we're supposed to come from love, that learning to love is the point of spiritual life, and that love is the first and greatest of all the Lord's commandments. So, another reminder that love is important might feel like old news. But in some ways, the point of this story is that coming from love or looking to love makes things work even in situations that don't seem like they have much to do with love. Coming from love helps us figure things out. When there's something we don't understand, we tend to want to fix this with the tools in our minds. We direct our resources inwards, towards our thoughts. Spend all our energy turning the cogs in our heads. And we say, once I've figured this out, after I finish the mental bit, then I'll go and do something with it. Then I'll bring love and life into the picture. But the Lord says, no. If you want to understand what you're supposed to do, if you want answers, then fish on the right side of the boat. If you want to understand, ask, how can I bring love into this situation? If you want to figure out what you're supposed to do, ask, how can I serve what is good right now? Obviously, the things that the Lord really wants us to figure out are spiritual things. Things that connect deeply and directly with living the truths of His Word. We might think, for example, that understanding the stock market is the most important thing on earth, but that's not what the Lord thinks. And He's not going to validate our overemphasis on the stock market by explaining to us exactly how it works. Trying to fish on the right side won't help in that case. If we're under a lot of financial pressure and dealing with a lot of anxiety, asking, how can I best serve my neighbor right now? How can I come from love? Is not going to tell us how to find more money. But it might help us find a place of peace. Asking, how can I serve what is good right here and right now is the same thing as asking, what really matters right here and right now. It changes our perspective. And if we can find peace in that, if we can rest in the conviction that we're trying to do what really matters and the Lord is blessing that effort, then maybe we will find the clarity and the confidence that we need to do something about our money or whatever external problem we may have. Fishing on the right side of the boat won't always tell us exactly what we need to do. Often it won't. The understanding that the Lord gives us when we start with love is the ability to see what really matters, to recognize the things that we need to hold on to and stand for, whatever else happens around us. It's not the ability to understand everything. It's something that leads us through our lives, something that helps us make sense of what and where we are. It's important to say that making love the goal doesn't mean giving up the search for clarity. And it certainly doesn't mean dismissing truth as mental clutter or something like that. People can and do get seduced by the glamour of knowledge. We're easily tricked into believing that knowing a lot about complicated things makes us matter, all the more so if we can express that knowledge in lots of very big words. But knowledge that exists for its own sake is useless. If we go to that sort of knowledge looking for answers to questions that really matter, we'll find that we catch nothing, though we search all night. But when we realize that knowledge alone is useless, we sometimes overreact. We start to speak as if all knowledge, all truth, even the truths of the Lord's Word, are just so much self-important baggage. Love is the first of all the Lord's commandments. Love is the first and last thing of His kingdom. But just because something's all about love doesn't mean it's not also all about truth. In fact, the Lord's whole point in the story we read is that love and truth come to us together. When we come from love, we understand the truth. And when we understand, then we become able to receive and express love. Real love and real truth are married and cannot be separated. With us, though, our loves and the truths we know are often not joined together. Many of our loves are selfish, and selfishness squirms away from the light of truth. And much of what we know is kept separate from love. We have to learn how to join these things together, and we learn this slowly. Often while we're learning, our heads will lead our hearts. And to some extent, that's what needs to happen. But in the end, love has to lead. In the end, love is able to make sense of the truth in a way that the truth alone can't make sense of love. In the teachings of the church, we're told to act and teach from good is to conclude innumerable things that belong to truth, but not the converse. As an illustration of this, if you took an organ out of the body, the heart or a liver or whatever, and studied it in isolation with no reference to or awareness of that organ's place within the body, it would be really hard to understand why that organ was the way it was. We could say, with great accuracy, there's these tubes and these compartments, but a functional understanding of that organ would evade us. The pieces of the body make sense within the context of the whole, because we see them in their context, we can understand their purpose. And words like purpose and function and use have to do with love. Love is what does. The truth by itself pinpoints and analyzes, but it doesn't do anything. Love is what moves. And love is also what integrates something into a system. Truth is about seeing things for what they are, but love is about the interconnections between things. Coming from love is like looking at the body and seeing its purpose, seeing how each part serves each other part, and then going and looking at the individual pieces. Then we have a chance of understanding the intricacies of why each organ is built the way it's built. We start with an organ and study it and try to extrapolate from that study what the rest of the body is or what it's for. That study won't help us understand very much. We ourselves are just tiny pieces in a vast body. We're tiny pieces of a huge system that the Lord has made, called creation. And hopefully we become of His kingdom of heaven, which we're told is ordered just as the human body is ordered. Each cell in a body, in isolation, makes no sense. Without reference to the rest of the body, it's really hard to say what that cell exists for. When we direct everything inwards, trying to make sense of the things we know, plumbing the depths of our minds, looking for answers, we don't see very much. But when we ask, what is my place within the whole, things start to make sense. When we think of our lives in terms of our interconnection with the people around us, asking, how can I serve? How can I love? Then we start to see the whole. Patterns and purposes start to come to light. Love is the lifeblood of the Lord's kingdom. Loving one another and loving the God who gives creation its life is what integrates us into the system that we were made for, the body within which we make sense. One final thought is that love is what allows us to recognize the Lord. When the Lord first came to the disciples who were busy fishing, they didn't know who He was. But when they threw their net on the right side of the boat, they recognized Him. They recognized Him because things started. Their failure gave way to abundance, and they knew that meant that their God was with them. The Lord is love itself. And He's always with us, because how could love itself abandon its children? But if we are not interested in love, in loving something outside of ourselves, then there's a gulf between Him and our ability to perceive Him. He feels far away. And He's life itself. When the Lord seems far away, then all the things that have to do with life seem far away too. Vitality, hope, abundance, fruitfulness, peace. All these things elude us. We can search all night, but we will not find them on our own. A simple shift can make all the difference. When we say, how can I love this person in front of me? How can I serve my God? Things start to line up. As we heard in our reading, the Lord is present with the person the moment he starts to love the neighbor. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find. So they cast it, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. So that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. Amen.